So I'm going on about my 6th month of running OnlyFans as my primary source of income, and I've learned so much in the last half year. It has been a rocky road. When I started, I was making literally like not even enough to make like a quarter of minimum wage per month. And as my pages have grown, as my understanding of the platforms have grown, I've learned that I was doing a lot of things wrong from the start and that it was really affecting my ability to grow on the platform, right? And I learned these through trial and error, but I think they're just useful tips, and so I wanted to share them with you. So these are some of the mistakes that I made starting out on digital platforms and what I would do differently. So the first mistake on digital platforms that I made, I think, came down to promotion. Like, I didn't really know how to build a promotional engine for myself, and so I copy pasted what other people were doing. And that meant I tried to start a social media profiles for my stuff and then just spent all this time and energy trying to grow on those platforms. And what I realized fairly quickly was that growing on them was not actually netting me more income, that it was a really slow grind, and that it was such a huge amount of time, like just so much time for a very small result. And so I sort of pivoted away from that. I don't think that you need to get off of social media necessarily, or that it doesn't work. In fact, most large content creators on sites like this are using social media really heavily. But I do think that it is really important to think through your promotion beyond just your social media if you want to save yourself a lot of time and if you want to save yourself a lot of stress. Because as soon as they stop putting in all that time and energy into social media, that's when my pages grew, and that's when I had more time to actually retain customers that were already there and to think of ways outside of the box to grow my following on these platforms. Second mistake that I made, especially early on, was not posting enough. And I think because on social media we have this like 1 to 2 posts per day sort of norm, that I was going into these digital platforms with that in mind, and it was costing me so much money because there are just a lot of different things you can say to your audience to get them engaged, and there's a lot of different ways to use features like messaging or like comments or like running polls that can keep your audience really entertained. And I think it's sort of the same for social media, right? Where like you think some amount is enough and you sort of have to like 10 times that, right? If you want to see some really good results, because just a lot of people aren't going to be around when you post. And if they miss that message, you don't want that to be like the only way they can pay you or the only way they're going to know about live stream you're doing or whatever. So like, I don't think that you can ever post enough, right? Thinking, if you're on like a regular schedule and you're posting once or twice a day, like if you were posting 10, 15 times a day, I still think that would be okay. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe if you're like really curating your content and trying to make it perfect and exact, etc., like 100% up to you. But for me, if I'm trying to connect with as much of my audience as possible, I'm gonna try to contact them as many times as I have the energy and time for. Next mistake was not thinking ahead. And that means not thinking ahead as far as my scheduling. Because I was just getting started and I wanted to have a bunch of content out there, I was sort of doing shoots like every day, and I didn't realize that that means I'm doing hair and makeup, I'm getting in the mood, I'm like sort of taking all this prep time to do something that is like not worth that amount of prep time. So what I started doing instead is batching out content. So instead of saying like, hey, I'm gonna shoot for like an hour today, I'll say, hey, this is a shooting day. I'm gonna try to shoot for as many hours as I'm like in a good mood and have high energy. And then on the other days, I can be editing and posting and sharing instead of feeling like getting all ready and then getting unready and then going to edit and doing all kinds of other things. Yeah, it's just a scheduling thing. It's an efficiency thing. And sort of combined with that is using scheduling features on these platforms. Like, unlike a lot of social media, a lot of these platforms let you schedule ahead. So I think it's really important, especially early on, to familiarize yourself with the platform so you're not like logging on to post every time or feeling like you're behind the clock. Like now I try to stay about a week ahead on my content. So if it's, Friday today, then I'm all ready to go until next Friday. and I don't just like stop, right? Like I keep going so that I'm always at least 1 week ahead on like videos, messages, posts, all that jazz. Next mistake was not promoting enough. And there's a lot of reasons this can happen. It can be, hey, I'm trying to rely on social media, or hey, I'm not sure really how to do this or how often I have to promote. I don't think that you can promote enough. And okay, maybe with posts I exaggerated, okay, maybe you can post too much. Like if you're posting like 300 times in a day, that might be like a little bit much, right? But with promotion, if you have 300 different promotions in 300 different places in a day, how lucky should you be, right? You can only ever do more when it comes to promoting yourself, because there are so many voices online. There's so many people trying to pull your customers' attention. And a lot of times customers sort of feel like they need to see your content or your brand a couple of times before they buy. And sometimes that might be 10, 20, 30 times. So even if you feel like you're doing a good amount of promotion, I really challenge you to think of like, how can I automate this, or how can I outsource this so that I'm not taking on the entire weight of promoting myself every single second of the day, but I am still putting myself out there enough to actually make a difference in my business. Next one is not being specific enough with what I was making. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't want to say that's a mistake quite, because I think that's just when you start, that's what happens. You're starting, like you don't know what your niche is going to be. You don't know what you're creating necessarily, but as soon as you can, start narrowing in and finding what your spot is, what your sweet spot is. Like, what do people really like when you share? What do people buy the most? When are people responding the most? And work with that to build a really good pricing strategy for those products, and also to use that in the way you brand your content as much as possible. You don't want to be in competition with every other person on the site. It's just a lot of people, and like, you know, regardless, someone's going to be doing what you're doing better and for a lower price. It's just true. Like, that's literally true of anyone doing adult content online, because like there's free sites where their money comes from ad revenue. We're not competing on that level of like, hey, lower price, higher quality necessarily. I think where we're competing, or the place where you can really build traction, is like finding a unique brand and then finding ways to connect with an audience that's excited about paying you. It's like gets off on the idea of paying for your content, of supporting you, and then rewarding them for being supportive and acknowledging that they're making a choice to support independent content creators, and like how cool that is, you know? And it doesn't have to be about phrasing it that way, but I do think thinking about retaining your customers and thinking out how to like make it feel like a little community, like a little place where they're appreciated for being there and where they're getting like a better user experience than just going online and Googling something, is gonna get you way ahead. And part of that is building out like what your specific things are, so that customers who want those specific things that there's gonna be like less of on those tube sites can come find you and can be like, yes, I wanna give you all my money because you're doing the thing I like in the way I like it, and you're communicating with me, and you're giving me all these awesome offers, right? And the final one, and I think this is so important, is like, I was pricing everything just way too high. Your business is your business. Like, if you want to price everything astronomically high, obviously that's up to you. For me, it was a huge mistake, because I come from a strip club background, and at the club, my strategy is always like charge more, ask for more. And it works in that environment because, one, I'm in person. I can sort of put on the charm and put on the pressure and help you make a decision in real time to pay that amount. And two, it's just sort of normalized. There's like standard industry push upwards on pricing. Well, when I went digital, I was still trying to enforce that, and just digging myself in and just like accomplishing nothing. Like, I would do all these promotions, I'd do all this marketing, I would go through all these steps, and I was like, no one's subscribing to my content. And I figured out, like, the way I figured this out was I just started doing research on other content creators that I really admired, who'd like, I'd seen their promotion and I was like, oh, I kind of want to see what they've got. Like, I want to see their content because it looks like it's so well done. And then started checking out what their pricing was. And I want to be clear, like, don't copy paste someone's pricing strategy. Don't copy paste their content. It's not a cute look. It's not a good way to build social capital. And it's lazy, it's sloppy, right? Don't go and copy paste what someone else is doing, but it is useful to be aware of how their people are pricing and understand how much content customers are getting for that amount. So like when I went and subscribed to the pages of people that I thought were doing really great and that I was like, these are my role models in this space, they were pricing like 10 times less than what I was pricing and putting out like 10 times better content. And I was like, oh, like that's why no one's buying anything I'm making, right? Because in this marketplace where there's literally millions of options, I'm just pushing up the hill, and even people who want to support me are gonna have doubt if they see a price tag that just doesn't match up with what everyone else is doing. So I'm not gonna say like you have to have the lowest price. I'm not gonna say that you gotta underprice everybody else. I'm not gonna say, hey, this is the magic number. I don't think any of those things are true. I'm gonna say experiment with promotional offers, experiment with setting a subscription price that doesn't necessarily align with the kind of money you'd be making in a real world, real time environment. And also really think through where else you're picking up money, because in that digital space, we can go in and be like, okay, the subscription, that's where it's at. That's where I'm making the money. And you really got to think about what other offers and what other pricing is available for your customers after they walk in the door. So I hope those tips are useful. I hope that my mistakes can help you move just a little bit faster through the process of getting started on these platforms. And I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if these are useful. Let me know what kind of content you'd like to see on our channel when it comes to going digital. And make sure you check out the links below where we're talking about a little going digital course. I have my OnlyFans referral link on there as well if you want to check it out, like if you're building a second promotional page or if you're just getting started. And if you use it, just make sure that you DM me. Instagram is usually the best way to reach out for a DM like that, so I can send you some information on promotion and on building up a marketing strategy that works whether you have a social media following or not.